Righteous Thoughts in Revolutionary Times. Written and edited by Ras Nubakhenaten. Forward by Orlando Buana Rawls. Copyright 2021 by Roy Stovall. All rights reserved. This book or any portion thereof may not be reproduced or used in any manner whatsoever without the express written permission of the publisher, except for use of brief quotations in a book review or scholarly journal. First printing, 2021. Dedication. This book is dedicated to my future progeny. Progress takes time. It doesn't always move in leaps and bounds as we would like it to. It often moves step by calculated step. It is pushed forward by those who are brave enough and care enough to take up the baton and carry it forward as far as they can. That is my only intention. I pray that you receive this world in a better condition than what was left to us. Ashe. Forward. Righteous Thoughts is a provocative work. Written with an intense labor of love, the author uses an eclectic approach to steer the reader towards a new level of self-awareness. The zeal and artistry displayed in this book reflects the person I have known for 25 years, one who is passionate and will use an array of concepts to paint a masterpiece, be it history, music, politics, or religion. Conceptually speaking, this document began over many conversations between the author and I around mankind's identification with divinity. In the midst of these engagements, there rose a source that propelled our chats into deeper dimensions, the ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead. Moreover, it was this heirloom's indigenous meaning, Pert em Heru, or coming forth by day, that served as the grain of inspiration for Righteous Thoughts. For the author, Righteous Thoughts is not an arbitrary term one mentions in a random conversation. Rather, it can be viewed as a concentrated stream of thoughts contributed to one's way of being in the world. The author boldly articulates a collection of daily principles, if you will, that highlight a recurring theme of consciousness. As this work is only a ripple in the continuous river of consciousness, may it add to the reader's journey of becoming anew. Orlando Buana Rawls. Preface. This book was divinely inspired from a deep spiritual place, that part of myself that is soulfully intertwined with the essence of the universe that created us all. Some years ago, a longtime friend of mine who was studying Egyptology suggested a book I should read. The book was titled The Book of Coming Forth by Day by Norman Ellis. What I read in between those pages spoke to something deep inside my spirit. What I came to understand was the title of the book, Coming Forth by Day, fully encompassed everything that was written in the book as well as its purpose. Essentially, the book was speaking on how to live and behave righteously on any given day. I would also learn that this same book, the Book of Coming Forth by Day, was more commonly referred to by European scholars as the Book of the Dead. Initially, I thought the title, Book of the Dead, was perhaps an erroneous misinterpretation by some old European scholar who couldn't understand what they were reading, or worse, some old European scholar who indeed knew what was in the book but wanted to shroud the information in fear and label it the Book of the Dead to inspire thoughts of spookism and potential curses. You know, everything that you see in Hollywood. I was wrong. It wasn't until I was actually in the process of writing this very book that my old friend who had first introduced me to the Book of Coming Forth by Day once again showed up to share more knowledge with me. However, now, my friend had become somewhat of an expert in the field of Egyptology and had even written his own thesis while gaining his master's degree in Egyptology. His very thesis was speaking to me in the creation of this book. In his thesis, he was not only examining the Book of the Dead, but also examining the role the Egyptian Kemetic god known as Osiris or Osar played in the book, as well as Egyptian society as a whole. This would further inspire me as I put together this book. It was almost as if the universe had helped to orchestrate this process from the inspiration to the manifestation. My friend explained to me that the Book of Coming Forth by Day is called the Book of the Dead because mankind in its present state is seen as dead. All of us are considered the living dead. Why was Osiris or Osar called the god of the underworld? Because they had taught that our present world was the land of the dead. Osiris was the god of the underworld because he had conquered death and been resurrected as told through the mythological story of Osiris and his death and resurrection. What does all this mean? If we accept and believe that spirit is all, that man has a spirit that is eternal, that spirit never dies and was alive before man incarnated in flesh and bone and will still live on when that flesh and bone turns to dust, then according to our ancient Egyptian ancestors, when the spirit of a man is entombed in flesh, it is akin to being buried in the ground. It being said that man is formed of dust and shall return to dust then coincides with the spirit being entombed in flesh, or dust of the earth, much like a seed being buried. So, the spirit of man falls from the heavenly ethereal realm into this underworld of living flesh and bone made from the dust of the earth. This process is a death for the spirit, because going from spirit to flesh was seen as a downgrade. Also, being that our spirit is now buried in flesh, our true spirit is dead to us. We walk around like zombies, controlled and swayed by earthly passions and manipulated and motivated by fleshly impulses. We are like zombies, the living dead, existing and moving but dead to the spirit that is buried deep inside each of us, the hidden one or Amen. Osiris, having been through trials and tribulations, was able to awaken the hidden one sleeping dormant inside of himself. This was the great resurrection of Osiris Osar. He had conquered his fleshly nature and awakened his spirit that had been there the entire time. What yogis and meditation coaches call the Watcher, when Amen, the hidden one, the Watcher, had been fully awakened, then man was no longer a zombie being controlled by fleshly passions and impulses or by the thoughts and ideas put forth by society and the manipulative powers that be. Then was man a living God with the ability to create and manifest whatever their thoughts and imagination desired. When man learned to stop the programs running on autopilot in his own mind and take back the seat of power, he was engaged in the resurrection process. Man now had conquered death and birthed new life. This same way Jesus the Christ is said to have conquered death and been reborn. Osiris was the original prototype. He was the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He had resurrected himself and stood as the example that all could do the same if they would simply awaken to the spirit that had been residing within them the entire time. That is essentially what this book is about at its core. Awakening the hidden one, Amen, the Watcher inside of you, so that you truly become a conscious participant and creator in your life and the lives of those around you. Creating thoughts to dwell on daily that will benefit your life in a positive way. Simply by selecting certain thoughts and dwelling on them daily, you create a different reality for yourself, and your active response to the world outside of you becomes more beneficial to you, as you no longer play victim or voyeur to the events in your life. Instead, you take a more active approach to everything, and it's a process that happens from the inside out. You start by selecting your thoughts, and in turn your actions change to align with those thoughts. You then become these new thoughts that you have chosen to dwell and act on. In essence, you are creating yourself based on the thoughts you select to dwell upon and act upon. Once you understand this, you will understand that governments, corporations, religious leaders, and marketing advertising companies have been the ones controlling you through the process of placing their thoughts and ideas inside your mind, and you, being naive and unaware, adopted these thoughts and ideas as your own, causing you to act in their best interest as opposed to your own best interest. This made you a zombie, having no true mind of your own. A slave to the thoughts and programs that others created and incepted into your mind as your own. Now, before I move on, I would like to point out that the thoughts and ideas associated with many systems of government, religion, and even some corporations are not inherently negative or manipulative. Some of these thoughts and ideas are just and true. Some are corrupt and crooked. What selecting your own thoughts allows you to do is examine these thoughts and ideas and select which ones align with you and what you want from life. Those you keep and embody and become a living representation of. All else you reject and place to the side. This is turning off the autopilot programming that society brainwashed inside of you and placing you back in the control seat of your life at the core level, the level of thought. Even in the creation story that is common to many religions, before the action of let there be light, there was first a thought. Darkness is all around. Everything in this universe manifests first as a thought. Once said thought is acted upon, so begins the process of creation. If the God of the Bible was content with the idea of darkness, there never would have been the thought to create light in everything thereafter. Much the same way, the hidden one, Amen, remains dormant inside all of us, shrouded in darkness until we awaken and bless the world with our glorious light. Awaken that which now lies dormant within you. Take back control of your mind and your thoughts. Change your paradigm and choose today who you will serve. Choose what thoughts you will serve and manifest into reality through your actions and influence. Dwell and focus on these thoughts until they become second nature, and the fruits of these thoughts are manifest in your physical everyday life. By choosing the right thought at the right time, you can consciously and purposely create the life you desire. I wish you all inner and outer peace, power, and prosperity. Nubakhenaten. Introduction. I once read somewhere that revolution is just a fancy word for change, and this concept has stuck with me ever since. So, what is a revolutionary time? To answer the what, it is simply times of change. To answer the when, it is always a time for revolution to change. Every day we are constantly changing. We are either growing and evolving, or we are decomposing into death, which to some is nothing more than a transition or a change into another form. When we breathe oxygen into our lungs, the air inside our body literally changes to CO2 before we exhale. This happens in a matter of milliseconds. When light hits our pupils, they change and dilate. This too happens almost instantaneously. With each new thought and experience, we change for better or worse. They say the only constant in life is change. Nothing stays the same. If we accept this as truth, then life itself is a golden thread of revolution, constant change. If it is always a time of revolutionary change, then I implore that you carry righteous thoughts with you at all times. But what exactly is a righteous thought? Simply put, a righteous thought is the right thought at the right time, as opposed to the wrong thought or to take action at the wrong time. So what would be the right thought during a time of change? I thought you'd never ask. Chapter 1. Gratitude. When you wake to see a new day, your first thought should be of gratitude. Gratitude should be the first thought because upon gaining consciousness and opening your eyes, you should realize that you still possess life. Life is the greatest gift from the Creator. It is the very essence whereby we move and have being. It was once quoted, "The ink of a scholar is worth more than the blood of a martyr." This can be interpreted as saying, all great men and women are most valuable and effective alive. Think of those who died in transition while fighting to better the world in some way or form. Upon their death, many left lasting legacies that have touched and affected those who came after them. As great as their legacy and accolades might be, imagine what more they could have conquered and contributed if they were still alive or had been able to live a longer life. If El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, Detroit Red, as he was known on the street, had died at the age of 22, he would have left a legacy as a common criminal and street hustler. However, because he lived a while longer, he was able to evolve into the man more commonly known as Malcolm X. Even towards the end of his life, Malcolm X was still growing, evolving, and changing. He was still in the midst of his own personal evolution of change. Brother Malcolm had come to the realization that while much of America and the world at the time was divided along racial lines, there were still those of various races, religions, and nations who were sympathetic to his cause and willing to serve and contribute in any way they could. Unfortunately, he was murdered before the world was able to witness this next stage of evolution as a man. The same can be said of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Had he died at the age of 25, his legacy would be that of a common Southern Baptist preacher. However, the world was blessed to see him evolve into a leader of the people against racism and segregation during a turbulent time in American history. Much like Brother Malcolm X, Dr. King was in the midst of his own personal revolution of change as he began to realize that not only was race a great issue dividing America, but that an even greater issue that stretched beyond race was the economic divide in America. Unfortunately, his life was cut short before the world was allowed to see this full evolution. This same focus can be applied to many great men and women who were cut down seemingly too soon in their life. So to reiterate, your first thought every day should be one of gratitude, being grateful for the life you still possess, Even if your current life's reality is one of poverty, slavery, or imprisonment, each day you wake to see comes with the opportunity to find a way out of poverty or break the fetters that bind you captive, mentally, physically, psychologically, or otherwise. Each day should be seen as a rebirth, a renewal of oneself. Why should one view each day as such? With life, you still have the opportunity to grow, evolve, and change for the better. You have the opportunity to correct past mistakes. You have a chance to change your life no matter what happened in your past or the day before. When Nelson Mandela was imprisoned during South Africa's apartheid era, he had already created a legacy for himself in the world. However, because he did not die while in captivity, his legacy and influence became greater once he was released from prison. The day he was released from prison signaled a revolution or a change in his life as well as his country and the world at large. No matter what frustration he might have justifiably had towards those who subjugated him, on that day he had to have a feeling of gratitude, knowing that he still had more life to live. In times of despair and discomfort, it is imperative that one wakes up with thoughts of gratitude for their life, because gratitude will motivate an individual to keep pressing on and not fall into the traps of depression and self-doubt. Remember, nothing is possible without life, and without life, nothing matters. The dead have no troubles, no fears, and no suffering. They also have no more time and opportunity to grow, evolve, and create, or even enjoy life's simple pleasures. One should always be grateful and show gratitude for the life they have been blessed with. This is a righteous thought to keep with you every day of your ever-changing, revolutionary life. Chapter 2, Self-Preservation. You have an inalienable right to life. You have a right to live your life the way you see fit as long as it doesn't infringe upon someone else's life. You have the right to do whatever is necessary to protect and maintain that life against anything and anyone that might threaten that life. That is what self-preservation is, and it is a righteous thought you should keep with you at all times. Merriam-Webster defines self-preservation as 1. Preservation of oneself from destruction or harm. 2. A natural or instinctive tendency to act so as to preserve one's own existence. Self-preservation is a natural instinct in all of us. This instinct also applies to our family and loved ones who we see as an extension of ourselves. You have every God-given right to protect your life and the life of your loved ones against any perceived threat or danger to that life. Nobody has the authority to give or take away your life. Whether willingly or unwillingly, we consciously submit and turn over our power of will to another, or we are deceived and it is stolen from us, or worse, that power of will is violently taken from us. There is no man-made law or government order that supersedes your right to self-preservation by any means necessary. Self-preservation can also extend beyond just physical human life. It can be extended, to a degree, to include quality of life. You have a right to protect your assets, your reputation, and your way of life against anything that seeks to threaten or destroy that, so long as it does not directly or indirectly cause injury or harm to another being without warrant. Self-preservation is a basic principle of life. Without life, there is nothing. Nothing to enjoy, nothing to strive for or against, nothing to love, nothing to cherish. Life is everything, and the main thing that matters above all else. Anything that threatens life should be handled with an attitude of self-preservation. As an adult, your life is your responsibility and yours alone. It is not the responsibility of the police to protect you and your loved ones. It is your responsibility. If you have children, the universe has entrusted you to be their guide and protector. To a certain degree, your children are an extension of you and therefore your responsibility to protect and preserve by any and all means necessary. Keep the thought of self-preservation with you at all times. To not protect oneself against any force that would seek to destroy the life you now have goes against your God-given instinct. Therefore, self-preservation is a must. Without life, we have nothing. Protect your life and the life of your loved ones by any means necessary. Life is fragile and gone in the blink of an eye. For this reason, one must always be ready to do what is necessary to preserve life. Chapter 3, ambition. Another righteous thought that one should keep with them at all times is ambition. One should always have an ambition to do something with the life they have, beyond just merely breathing and existing. Ambition is simply a desire to accomplish something and having the will to see it through to completion. It doesn't have to be for monetary gain or some grand scheme to influence or change the world. Ambition is simply the drive and motivation to get up and do something fulfilling. Now, that might lead to something economically or financially fulfilling, or it might be something intrinsic or intangible. Often we hear stories of elderly people or even young people who are already accomplished by society standards and have a desire to go back to school to get their high school diploma or GED or even a college degree. I myself have often looked at these individuals and wondered why. If you are already able to become successful in life or are already elderly and approaching your inevitable demise, what value does a high school diploma or GED or even a college degree possess? I can't answer that question personally, but what I have recognized is that feeling of accomplishment is evident in all who have had such ambitions and desire. This accomplishment brings them a sense of fulfillment, and just as I personally don't understand their logic, your ambitions don't have to be understood by anyone other than yourself. The point is, ambition serves as motivation to accomplish something fulfilling with the life you have. That sense of fulfillment adds to your quality of life. People who wake up with a sense of ambition are seldom depressed because they have their inner drive and ambition that is motivating them to do things that bring them fulfillment and a sense of accomplishment. Ambition is a righteous thought that will keep you motivated as you press forward through the revolutions and changes of life each and every day. Be ambitious every day. Chapter 4. Time. Time is something we should always be mindful of as we move through our daily lives. We are all gifted with an unknown yet finite amount of irreplaceable time. There are 24 hours in a day, but no one knows how many days they have to live or when their last hour will be. Being mindful of how limited and precious time is should not only add a sense of urgency to your life's ambitions, but it should also teach us the value of each moment. One of my mentors once explained to me that whenever someone dies, he divides their age in half. Doing this puts a very real focus on the value of one's time. If someone dies at the age of 22, they had already unknowingly lived half of their life by the age of 11. How would our value of time change if we knew exactly how many years we had to live? When Tupac Shakur died at the young age of 25, he had already accomplished more than many would do in their life, even though they might live twice as long as he did. One of the motivations that Tupac seemed to live by was death around the corner. This adage is full of life metaphors, but the key component is the essence of time. Ancient samurai warriors were taught to live their life with the conscious knowledge that they could die at any given moment. This type of a relationship with one's own mortality and human frailty was used to serve as the ultimate motivation to live a present and fulfilling life with the limited time we have been given. It inspires one to take advantage of every moment and not waste time on frivolous matters. It is said that when Tupac would go to the studio to record, he would jump into his work, often recording multiple songs one after the other all in one session. Tupac valued his time. When a song is recorded, there are several steps that must be taken before the song is ready for the public to hear. When Tupac was recording music, he didn't take a lot of time in between takes or waste time in the studio hanging out and being overly social. He would record his vocals for a song and then move on to recording the next song, often without even listening to the full playback of what he was recording. He was once quoted as saying he didn't have time to keep playing back the song or to stand by while the sound engineer spends time perfecting the sound quality of the music, which could often take hours and sometimes days to complete. When Tupac Shakur passed on, it was said that he had well over 100 unreleased songs that had never been heard by the general public. We all have the same amount of time in a day. The difference is how we use that time and how much of it is wasted on frivolous matters. What will you do with the next 24 hours of your life? Are you even certain that you have 24 hours left to live? If you did know for certain you only had 24 hours of life left, how would you spend that time and how much of it would you allow others to waste? When closely examined, we also realize that not only is time relative, but time is actually a way to measure the distance between events that occur. The thing that makes time relative is our presence or attention during said time. If you are given an hour to complete a grueling task that you dread, you instantly become present and aware of every unsatisfactory condition. This makes each minute of the task seem like an hour in itself. If you have some entertaining music to listen to while completing the task, it makes the time go by faster. This is because it takes our focus off the grueling task as we get caught up in the entertaining music. When we are focused on listening and moving to the music, we are not fully present with the dreaded task at hand. At the same time, if we give the same task to someone who enjoys the process, that same hour seems even shorter as they lose themselves in the process and lose track of time. Before they know it, the task is complete. This is how time is relative. It is your approach and where your presence lies which makes the difference. You can stop time in a single moment or lose yourself in the process as time goes by. The key is to be mindful of time while also not focusing on time. I admit it sounds tricky, but this is key to living in the moment, or as some say, being present. Objectively speaking, the concept of time doesn't exist, because if it's infinite, there is no beginning or end that we definitely know of. There's only the present moment. The concept of time is merely a ruler or a measuring stick, measuring time itself as infinite. But we humans have a finite amount of moments that we call life. Time is simply the unit by which we measure the relationship of one moment to another. Your physical birth into this world was one moment in a series of moments that occurred on a particular day at a particular time. Right after you were born, another moment occurred, and then another and another. This is time in raw form. None of us know exactly how many moments we are granted in this life, and none of us know when our last moment will be. Every breath we take is a moment of pure life to be lived and experienced in real time. Every breath we waste is a moment lost forever. Cherish every moment and live in it. The only time is now. Chapter 5. Heaven. Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Many probably recognize these words as the opening stanza of what is commonly known as the Lord's Prayer from biblical teachings and Christian ideology. I personally do not subscribe to any religious fraternity, but that line, on earth as it is in heaven, has always stood out to me. If things on earth were the same as in heaven, then that would be heaven on earth, correct? A question was once asked, why should you die to go to heaven? I, for one, have always wondered the same. Why should we die to go to heaven when we can create the same thing right here on earth while we are alive and healthy? What is your vision of heaven? If you could design your own heaven, what would it be like? What is stopping you from creating this heaven you desire right here and now? There's an old spiritual song that states, I've never been to heaven, but I've been told the streets up there are paved with gold. Well, there are wealthy business professionals and successful entertainers that have jewelry, homes, and even cars that are adorned in gold. In some sects of the Islamic faith, it is said that a man receives multiple wives when they reach heaven. Are there not men alive now in different parts of the world who have multiple wives and practice polygamy? Again, I ask you, what is stopping you from creating and manifesting your vision of heaven right here and now? In almost every spiritual practice, there is talk of reaching a higher level of understanding and being. However, all spiritual teachings also say that this is not an easy task, but one that must be consciously and consistently cultivated. Some say you get out of this life what you ask for. Others say you get what you earn and work for. The Christ said, you have not because you ask not. So why not ask for your heart's desire? Why not work for a heaven you can see and touch and experience right now? How would you feel if you were to attain your vision of heaven? Why can't you feel that way right now? I, for one, have never subscribed to the idea or the notion that one must suffer through this present life in order to receive blessings in wealth and death. I believe, much like the Christ says, that we are to have life and have it abundantly. This is a mindset. Abundance is a mindset. Heaven is not just a place or a physical manifestation, but it is a state of being mentally and spiritually, being at peace with all things, unbothered by the ills and stress of the world. If our thoughts dictate our actions and energy goes where attention goes, then what would happen if we all thought about the best that we want from this life and we focus on accomplishing and achieving that which our hearts desire? How would our existence be different if we focused our energy on creating a state of inner peace that flows through every thought and action in our being? How would we treat each other differently? What is stopping us from creating on earth as it is in heaven? Mindset. Everything that exists in this physical realm was once an inanimate thought or idea that someone or several people focused on until the idea was manifest in the physical. The Wright brothers are credited with creating the airplane that allowed man to fly with the birds and eventually even higher. Were the Wright brothers the first to have this idea of flying? Absolutely not. There were countless individuals who came before them with the same desire and goals, and they worked to create such until eventually the Wright brothers were able to get it right. So now, thanks to the Wright brothers and all who came before, man can fly in the sky, high as the angels that some imagine fly around in heaven. On earth, as in heaven, is a mindset. However, before you can have the mindset to create a living heaven or heavenly state of being, you must cultivate a mind of abundance. In our capitalist society, we are presenting the ideas of scarcity. There's never enough to go around, or there's always someone or something waiting to take what you have. They say there isn't enough food, while simultaneously throwing away tons of perfectly fine food every day in the food industry. They charge people fortunes for diamonds because they have convinced the general public that diamonds are rare and in scarce supply, when truly they are abundant and plentiful in the earth. This scarcity mindset of lack convinces us that our dreams and ideas are too lofty and not realistic. This same scarcity mindset also teaches us to hoard for fear that there won't be enough or that supply will run out. It makes us covet what we don't have and focus on what we lack, as opposed to showing gratitude for what we have and realizing there is enough space and resources for us all to thrive. This capitalist scarcity mindset is responsible for creating fear and creating a have versus have not environment where everyone is in competition with each other and trying to one up the next man instead of working as a collective. As the saying goes, all ships rise with the tide. So if you desire to create your space on earth as in heaven, then the first thing you must do is rid yourself of a scarcity mindset and adopt the mindset of abundance. Having a mindset of abundance creates the confidence needed to create and go after the things you desire in this life with the belief that those things you desire have been set aside for you. An abundant mindset doesn't see any task or idea as too big or too great. On the contrary, it views all things as potential. The Wright brothers had plenty of mishaps and mistakes before they succeeded in taking flight for the first time. The reason they didn't quit when they ran into an issue or had a failed attempt is because they had the confidence to believe that their crazy idea was possible or had the potential to be realized. As the great motivational author Napoleon Hill said, attitude determines altitude. Basically, saying you can only rise as high as you believe you can. If you think it's not possible or that there isn't enough, then it won't be possible and it will never be enough. However, if you have an abundant mindset and a confident attitude, you will convince yourself that your goals are indeed attainable, and you won't stop until you have attained and manifested. So, if you take on that abundance mentality with the confidence that there is more than enough possibilities and potential, then you essentially become limitless. Hampered only by your mindset of faith in abundance or faith in scarcity. Where does your faith lie? Someone once said that stress is nothing more than faith in the negative, or believing that bad things will happen. This forces you to focus on all the perceived negative potential possibilities. By focusing your attention on the negative so much, you fuel the very things you don't want. Why? Because you have a mindset that had more faith in the bad things that might happen and no faith or a lack of faith in all the positive or good potential possibilities. Perception is reality. If we perceive this world as a living hell or a life of scarcity, then your reality will reflect just that. However, if we perceive our world as a place of abundant potential, then our approach and attitude to life changes. We no longer look for the worst that can happen. We focus on the best that can happen. Even when things don't go how we planned, an abundant mindset tells us that this setback is not the end and the goal is still in sight. So instead of throwing our hands up in defeat, we instinctively adjust our approach, make corrections, and continue working to manifest our ideas of heaven on this earth. Once you stop allowing your focus and fears to be dominated by the negative potentials and you begin to only focus on the potential blessings and possibilities, your attitude and mindset can't help but go through a revolution or change to a more peaceful and positive state of countenance. As you are able to maintain this countenance throughout your life, you are creating a heavenly state of being and feeling. And if you focus on your desires and your heavenly ideas while maintaining a peaceful, heavenly countenance about yourself, then you will be creating a heavenly state of being about yourself while you are simultaneously creating a physical environment that is heavenly in your mind. Why would you want to create anything but a heavenly existence while you are alive? If they say this life is short, then why should we spend time in the negative creating a hell on earth when we could focus on the best potentials and create a heaven right here on earth? This is work that can be done individually and collectively. The only thing that is required is an attitude of abundance and the confidence that you can achieve and have your heart's desires. Heaven should not be a place that comes at the end of suffering. Rather, it should be a place you seek to live and exist in every waking day of your life. Remember, before you can physically create a heaven on earth, you must first spiritually and mentally create that state of mind within yourself. Dwell on these righteous thoughts until they physically manifest. If you try to create a physical state of heaven before you create a heavenly mental state of being, then you will be like those poor souls who have attained much material success and wealth, yet can't find peace anywhere and are depressed with feelings of lack while living inside their golden palaces. In a society where many perpetuate a scarcity mindset, choosing to operate with a mentality of heavenly abundance is indeed a revolutionary thought. Chapter 6. Love. When speaking on love, it is always best to begin with self. How can one truly love another unless they have first truly loved themselves? This brings up the question, how do you love yourself? Are you able to love yourself in spite of your flaws? Are you able to forgive yourself for your own shortcomings and mistakes? Do you subject yourself to disrespectful talk or treatment from others? It is frequently said in many different religions and spiritual practices that one should love his or her neighbor as they love themselves, and they should not subject anyone to any type of treatment that they themselves would not like to receive. This reinforces the original question. How do you love yourself? The way you love yourself ultimately will determine how well you are able to love another. The topic of self-love brings up many deep introspective questions. We are often so focused meeting the needs of things outside of ourselves, spouse, family, job, boss, etc., that we totally neglect taking care of our own needs. This is not love. Seeing how so many neglect their own needs, it is no surprise that we often neglect the needs of those closest to us, our loved ones and friends. If we can sacrifice our own needs so easily, then it is no wonder why in today's connected society, so many feel isolated, neglected, and ignored by society. For some, these feelings of isolation and neglect are amplified and even more apparent in their own home. It has been my journey and experience that the more I have learned to truly love and know myself, the easier it is for me to relate to others and be empathetic to their needs and situations. The better I have come to understand my own nuances, the better I am able to understand my neighbor's perceived differences. I found the easier it was for me to forgive myself for my past mistakes and acts of ignorance, the easier it has been to forgive those around me for their own flaws and inner conflict. Loving oneself creates empathy. Empathy is the main ingredient needed to love another. Empathy brings understanding. It is often quoted that people fear what they don't understand. Fear and love cannot coexist. You can't love that which you fear, and that which invokes fear can't receive love. The question is often posed, is it better to be loved or feared? Being feared won't necessarily protect you. In fact, when people are fearful, they often strike out against that which they fear, especially if they have a strong sense of self-preservation. Since fear cancels out love, to be feared only blocks your ability to give and receive love. They say love will make you do some crazy things. Well, fear often makes people do dark and shameful things. What type of energy do you want to invoke in others? People inspired by love have done some amazing things. The feeling of being loved is one of the best things to experience. Why would you block yourself from this experience out of fear? Why would you block anyone else from having this experience out of fear? Carry love for yourself in every moment, in every breath. Love is the greatest motivator of all. Gratitude is love for what one has. Self-preservation is love for one's own life. Ambition is love for one's potential. Having reverence for time is having love for the possibilities that come with having time, as opposed to the lack of possibility that comes with death when time is up. Heaven is a state of existence submerged and totally encompassed by love. Love truly is the key to everlasting life. Do everything with love. Care for your neighbor with love. Relate to your family and friends with an air of love. Defend and protect all that you love. Lead with love. This is the most righteous and revolutionary thought to keep with oneself at all times in every breath. Do it all with love. Chapter 7. Obstacles. Begin each day by telling yourself, today I shall be meeting with interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness. All of them due to the offender's ignorance of what is good or evil. Marcus Aurelius. This is a quote by the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius. He was considered by many to be the last righteous emperor ending the golden age of Rome. If you have viewed the movie Gladiator, starring Russell Crowe, Marcus Aurelius was the old king who died, giving rise to his tyrannical son, played by Joaquin Phoenix. Marcus Aurelius has a collection of wise quotes that have been collected together in what is known as the Emperor's Handbook. Obstacles are a part of life just as death is a part of life. Neither can be avoided. Therefore, we must learn how to approach and overcome the obstacles that lie in our path. In the Bible, there are several verses, mainly in the book of Revelation, that speak on the power of overcoming obstacles. To him that overcometh will I grant to sit with me in my throne, even as I also overcame, and am set down with my Father in his throne. Revelations 3:21. He that overcometh, the same shall be clothed in white raiment, and I will not blot out his name out of the book of life, but I will confess his name before my Father and before his angels. Revelations 3:5. He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. To him that overcometh will I give to eat of the tree of life, which is in the midst of the paradise of God. Revelations 2:7. And he that overcometh and keepeth my works unto the end, to him will I give power over the nations. Revelations 2:26. He that overcometh shall inherit all things. Revelations 21:7. Note, before we go any further, allow me to take this moment to clarify that my use of the Bible as reference material is not in any way or form an endorsement of any religion, as I personally do not subscribe to any religious fraternity. The reference is solely for the purpose of making the point using what I deem to be a universal reference tool, the Bible, which is a common book in many modern-day societies at the time of this publication. If you notice, there is a common theme amongst these verses that can be found in the King James Version of the Bible. They illustrate the point that there is a reward to be had from any obstacle that one is able to overcome. As the saying goes, there are no losses, only lessons to be learned. The only real failure is if you fail to learn from the experience. Many have a flawed notion that spiritual enlightenment is a journey of bliss and happiness. On the contrary, the spiritual journey and awakening is the beginning of new trials and tribulations that one must overcome in order to ascend on the path of enlightenment. Even the most enlightened, highly regarded individuals in our society and all throughout history have been met with obstacles to their desired goal. Some of these obstacles are external, like fighting against systemic oppression or fighting for human rights, while other obstacles are internal, like dealing with unhealed trauma from childhood or a traumatic experience. This is a righteous and revolutionary thought you must know and keep with you at all times. There will be obstacles to overcome no matter what. You cannot escape struggle, as it is a necessary part of growth. Even those who have no desire to grow and elevate themselves will still be faced with obstacles stemming from their own ignorance and refusal to grow. The key is to persevere. Obstacles are nothing more than steps that we must climb in order to reach and manifest our ambitions and goals in this life. This does not mean that you must suffer in order to find peace or to accomplish a goal. Some people in some religious groups place too much emphasis on suffering. You do not have to endure suffering in order to achieve a goal. However, there will always be obstacles that must be overcome in order to reach your goals and ambitions. For further clarity, allow me to illustrate the difference between obstacles and suffering. To live is to suffer, but to survive, well, that's to find meaning in the suffering. DMX, Slipping. The author of the above quote is implying that as long as we are alive, there will be obstacles in our path. When you overcome these obstacles, you learn valuable lessons that make you stronger and help you ascend higher on your journey in life. The suffering itself is more or less your response to the obstacles before you. In the Buddhist tradition, they teach that suffering does not come from the obstacles in our path. Rather, suffering comes from how we perceive the obstacles in our path, as well as our inability to learn the lesson being taught. It is often said that perception is reality. How you perceive a thing or a situation determines how you respond to it. If you perceive obstacles as challenges to overcome, as opposed to the universe being against you, then you will approach the obstacles on your path with a different attitude. From this perspective, obstacles become puzzles to figure out, as opposed to a punishment meant to make you suffer. There is a lesson to be learned in every obstacle. You will not overcome any obstacle in your path unless you learn the lesson the obstacle is attempting to teach you. If you take on the perspective that any obstacle you face is only to make you stronger, then you will delight in having obstacles in your path because they give you new opportunities to show your ability to overcome. This in itself becomes motivation. The mountain is no longer an obstacle in your path trying to deter you. The mountain is now an opportunity for you to show what you have learned and demonstrate your own strength and ability as you conquer and overcome the mountain or obstacles in your path. The key is to realize that you are the problem solver. If there is an obstacle or a problem, then you are the man or woman for the job. This perspective brings proper enthusiasm and motivation to conquer any obstacle before you. You only suffer when you refuse to learn the lesson. The only failure is failing to learn the lesson. All else is merely an obstacle to be overcome. All things are awaiting the one who is able to overcome. Your goals and ambitions are waiting for you just beyond the obstacles that lie in your path. In nature, there are species of birds that must fight and struggle their way out of their eggs as they hatch. The mother bird will see her young chicks fighting and struggling to get out of their shell, yet she will not intervene or assist them at all. The struggle that is required for these newly born chicks to get out of their shell actually helps to strengthen the baby chicks so that once it has made its way out of the egg, its wings and limbs are now strong enough to carry the bird so that it is able to walk and move on its own. If the mother or anyone else intervenes in this hatching process by assisting the chick out of the egg, the baby bird will not build the strength that it needs to hold its own weight up, and the result is the bird is weak and lame and will most likely die, as it is not strong enough to survive. For these baby chicks, the obstacle of getting out of their eggshell is necessary for their development. The same applies to our life. The obstacles we face and overcome are sometimes necessary for our development. The lessons we learn will help us achieve even greater things in our future. In closing, when it comes to obstacles in life, there are 3 key points to remember. 1. This too shall pass. You will not always be in a state of struggle. There will always be obstacles, but the process of struggling to overcome those obstacles is a temporary process that ends once you learn the lesson that is necessary to overcome said obstacle. 2. Trust in the process. Have faith that any obstacle that comes before you will ultimately enrich you and make you stronger and better prepared for future obstacles you might face and overcome. 3. All things are granted to the one who overcomes. Everything you desire is waiting on the other side of that obstacle. Do not be overcome by the obstacles set in your path. Overcome the obstacles in your path and you will be rewarded. You will run into obstacles daily. Therefore, this thought process and approach is something you should carry with you every day as you grow and evolve and meet the challenges and obstacles of the day. Chapter 8. Death. God standeth in the congregation of the mighty. He judgeth among the gods. How long will ye judge unjustly and accept the persons of the wicked? Selah. Defend the poor and fatherless. Do justice to the afflicted and needy. Deliver the poor and needy. Rid them out of the hand of the wicked. They know not, neither will they understand. They walk on in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are out of course. I have said, ye are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High. But ye shall die like men, and fall like one of the princes. Arise, O God, judge the earth, for thou shalt inherit all nations. Psalms 82. This is by far my favorite passage in the entire Bible. There's so much to unload here. There's the charge and the challenge for mankind to rise up and take action in the world around us. There is encouragement and validation as the Hebrew God states plainly that ye are gods, endowed with power and ability to have dominion in this world and inherit all nations. This passage is the Hebrew God literally telling his people that he has empowered them with everything they need to rid the earth of wickedness and protect the weak and the ignorant. Yet, in the midst of this passage is a reminder of man's mortality. Ye shall die like men. Death is an unavoidable part of life. It is a necessary part of maintaining balance in the universe. At the time of this writing, we celebrated my grandmother's 99th birthday. To live 99 years is a blessing, especially when you are diligent in maintaining a healthy lifestyle that allows you to age with some grace as my grandmother has. Even still, at 99, her mortality is staring us all in the face. The reality that at 99 years, any day could be her last is very apparent. However, that reality truly applies to all of us. Any day could be our last day as well, no matter how old or young we are. I'm sure many of you have known people who died young, babies who died before they seemingly had a chance to fully experience life. A good friend and mentor of mine practiced a healthy lifestyle of proper dieting and exercise in order to prolong his life and the quality of his life. Unfortunately, he died in a hit-and-run accident when someone ran the red light and crashed into his car. He died on the scene. I remember one of my friends calling me asking if I had heard what had happened to him because word was spreading that something might have happened to him and some of his friends weren't able to reach him. My immediate reaction was to call him myself and check on him. I had no idea about the accident yet, and it was the furthest thing from my mind. I remember thinking to myself, he stays healthy. I've never seen him sick or under the weather. Maybe he's out of town or business or away from his phone. Upon finding out the truth of his untimely death, I couldn't help but think about the last conversation I had with him just a week before he passed. He had been reading a book titled The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. He was telling me about the book and how the focus was on making the most of the time we have here and now. We can't change the past, and we can't predict the future. All we can do is act in the now. What we do now will ultimately dictate our past and create our future. We had a very in-depth conversation on the matter, and then we departed for the night. I never thought that would be the last time we spoke. His death made the conversation even louder in my head. All we have is now. Yet we waste so much of now on frivolous and trivial matters. If you knew you would surely die tomorrow, what would you do today? If you knew you would die a week from now or a year from now, what would you do with your time and what would you focus on the most? This question is the reason why death is a righteous thought in revolutionary times. We should never lose sight of our mortality. As one of the greatest poets of our time said, "I see death around the corner." Tupac Shakur. As morbid as this statement seems, it truly should inspire life in you. Why? Because knowing that our time is limited and that we can die at any given moment should naturally motivate us all to be more productive with the time we have now. Being aware of one's mortality can actually serve to extend one's life and enrich it as well. It can extend our life by keeping us cautious of the potential outcome of our decisions at any moment. It can enrich our lives by inspiring us to take advantage of opportunities when they are presented, as we may not have that same opportunity tomorrow. Seize the day, for life is fleeting and every breath we take is a step closer to our eventual demise. Be mindful that your time is limited and it is unknown how much time we have been allotted in this physical existence. Death is coming for us all. Don't just be mindful of your time and ultimate death, but be mindful of the limited time allotted to your friends and loved ones and make the most out of the time you have to share with them. I know the day will come when my grandmother, whom I love dearly, will no longer be with us in the physical. Knowing this motivates me to make the most of the time she has left. However, we should not wait until our friends and family are in their old age or on their deathbeds to make the most of the time we have. We should do this every day with everyone that we love and care about. Your children might be young, but that doesn't mean they are promised another day or that they will make it to adulthood. Many children die every year and don't make it to adulthood or even their teenage years for some. Even still, there are some who died while still in the womb. They too had life by the evidence of the heartbeat that was captured through sonogram. Death has no discrimination factors whatsoever, and there are endless ways and directions that death can swoop in from and take us away like a breeze blowing through the autumn leaves. You don't know which direction the wind comes from or in what direction it will blow. The same applies to death. It is often unpredictable, yet always just around the corner. If we go through life acting as if we will live forever, or as if we are untouchable, then life will surely remind us of our mortality and quite possibly charge us the ultimate price for our negligence and ignorance. Keeping the thought of death on our minds while realizing how fragile this life is should not serve as a deterrent or strike fear in anyone. Death should be one of our greatest motivators in this life. It should motivate you to enjoy more life and to be more productive with the time we have been allotted, for no one knows the time or the hour. There is no escaping physical death, but there is a way to conquer death. This is done by leaving your mark on this world and the people in it. Many have lived and journeyed this earth, and in death their memory faded from history. Those great courageous souls from our ancestry, whose names we still call, are those who have conquered death. They left an imprint that has stood the test of time and been passed down through generations. They have made lasting contributions to this world. This is how you conquer death, by producing something in this life that will touch people in the world for generations to come. Take advantage of every breath of life you have. An afterthought on death. Death is a necessary part of life. Why is it necessary? Death clears the way for new life. Imagine if in the entire history of humanity nobody ever died. Nobody. What if everyone from the prehistoric days to modern day was alive and walking the earth? Will there even be space on the earth for all these people? Will the earth be able to sustain such a population? To whom it might concern, no, this is not an endorsement for population control by any means. Much like how leaves fall from a tree and decompose, becoming fertile soil for even more trees and foliage, the same goes for mankind. We are able to gain insight and inspiration by looking at the lives of those great souls who came before us. Having their life story, from beginning to end, to observe as an example, for better or worse, serves as motivation for the next generation to build upon, learn from, and evolve even higher. We are planted on this earth. We grow through struggle and achievements. We bloom in our highest glory, and then we too wither and fall like one of the princes, or like leaves from a tree, to become fertile soil for the next generation to grow forth from. Chapter 9. Youth. Thug Life was an acronym created by the late American poet, revolutionary, and rapper by the name of Tupac Amaru Shakur. It breaks down as, the hurt you give little infants fucks everyone. American scholar and revolutionary Frederick Douglass was quoted as saying, "It is easier to build strong children than to fix broken men." In 2018, there was a British-produced movie released under the title Black Mirror Bandersnatch. Bandersnatch was filmed with a new and unique approach. It was an interactive film allowing the viewer to make decisions on behalf of the protagonist. A quick synopsis. The main character is a young computer programmer living in the 80s during the beginning of the information technology era. Almost from the first scene of the movie, the protagonist comes to a point where he must make a choice or a decision. You, the viewer, at this point are presented with several options as the courses of action for the protagonist to choose. Once you, the viewer, decide what choice the protagonist should make, the movie follows the outcome of that choice until you reach another point in the film where a crucial decision must be made, and this process continues throughout the movie. Now, if you have not viewed this movie but are interested in watching, then stop reading and watch the movie because the next few lines will have big spoilers. Okay, if you are still reading, I'm assuming you have watched the movie or don't care about the spoilers. The movie was created with multiple endings according to the sum of the decisions you, the viewer, helped the protagonist make. However, there is only one true happy ending to the film. The point of this interactive film is to make the correct decisions so that the protagonist arrives at a happy ending. All of the other alternate endings result in tragedy for the protagonist based off of a decision made. Once you have reached one of the tragic alternate endings, you get the opportunity to go back to a previous decision made, and you have the option to change that decision and see how the film plays out based on this new decision. However, in order to reach the happy ending, you have to go all the way back to the protagonist's childhood and make a seemingly insignificant decision that ultimately affects the rest of the protagonist's life. The movie received mixed reviews because it was a different viewing experience. Some people didn't like having to try and figure out the puzzle of the film. The biggest takeaway from the film for me was that a simple decision he made as a child had a major effect on the rest of his life. This is the reality of our youth. It has been said that we spend our adult lives trying to heal the damage that we received as children. When I was in school, I never understood why teachers and adults would often say, "Wait until you're older and you enter the real world," as if somehow children weren't living in the real world already, as if the decisions and events of our childhood didn't have potential real-life consequences for better or worse. I understand that most children don't have the adult responsibilities. However, the power of decisions made in our youth is very real and can have far-reaching consequences beyond our youthful days. Children of all ages every day make decisions that directly affect the course of their lives. It is often difficult to recognize or even realize how the far-reaching effects of our youthful decisions and follies have impacted our adult lives. Re-exploring your youthful decisions, good and bad, as an adult is a necessary key to attaining true knowledge of self and self-mastery, as well as fixing certain flaws or addressing deep wounds that have never been properly bandaged up and are still unhealed and affecting you still as an adult. The purpose of this exercise is not to berate yourself or feel shame over your past childhood experiences or decisions that might have directly affected your adult development. The purpose is to heal the hidden wounds. There is an old teaching about trying to walk around with a rock in your shoe. Yes, we all can technically and literally walk around with rocks in our shoes every day. However, it creates definite discomfort and can even create potential health problems the longer we walk around with this rock in our shoe. This is the reality of walking around every day with hidden unhealed wounds that might stem from something that happened in our youth or a decision we made that directly affected our life. Many people today are walking around with rocks in their shoes, and it is wreaking havoc on our adult lives and relationships. Our best bet is to remove the rocks from our shoe and deal with any unresolved, hidden, or unhealed wounds so that we can stand straight and walk upright without anything crippling or paining us. The problem is that many have been walking with these uncomfortable rocks in our shoes for so long untreated that we have gotten used to the discomfort. We create coping mechanisms instead of dealing with the core issues. We focus on treating the symptoms but often overlook the root cause, which is sometimes found in the experiences and decisions of our youth. Chapter 10. Children and Parents. Studies in psychology say that the first 5 to 7 years of a child's life are the most influential because that is when the brain is in sponge mode, soaking up everything in its environment with no prior knowledge or experience to filter out what is right or wrong or normal or natural. This is the purpose of parents and parenting. Your child is not your possession. Your child does not belong to you. I know this might sound strange by our current views on child rearing, but let me explain further. When a man and a woman come together, the man provides the seed, which is essential, and the woman provides the egg, which is also essential. Science has shown us that it is possible to move the egg and embryo out of a woman's body and place it in a surrogate or a test tube for further development until gestation is complete, meaning that a woman's womb acts as a portal or a door through which life enters the world. This is not to diminish her role or her importance in child rearing or in society. My point is that a child is not a woman's possession, nor is it a man's possession or property. Yes, the woman might carry the child in her bosom, but it is not her sole creation or property. The child is not her body. The child is being sheltered inside of her body for a temporary period. When a man and a woman decide to engage in the act of procreation, more commonly referred to in our culture as sex, they are entering into a universal contract of sorts. To understand this, one must first acknowledge and recognize that the purpose of sex is purely for procreation. Everything else that sex is used for or that sex is used to express is of man's creation. Engaging in the act of procreation to express your love and affection for another, or just because you are sexually aroused, does not negate the fact that nature's created and intended purpose of said act is procreation. And by engaging in the act which creates life, you are telling the universe, consciously or unconsciously, that you are prepared to be a steward and a guide for another life. This is the sole purpose and necessity of parenting, to be a guide for another human life. When children are born, they know nothing about the current society they are born into or the ways of the world in which they live. Everything that children learn is by observing their environment. Their immediate environment is their parents and immediate family. Aside from the fact that children are not able to provide for themselves, children also need guidance on how to be a responsible, functioning member of our society. Parents are to merely act as a welcoming party to this physical world for new humans being incarnated. Parents and adults in general are to teach children how to properly engage and interact with the world through their words, actions, and examples. Imagine coming to a place or a land you've never visited before. Naturally, you will observe the actions and attitudes of the native people you encounter in this new land in order to fit in and interact harmoniously with those you meet and encounter. You might also seek some kind of assistance or a tour guide whom you will have many questions for because you have not lived in or visited this place before, and also there would be need for a translator because there would be a language barrier, as humans do not come into this world already knowing how to speak a particular language. The language they will one day speak fluently, like so many other things, is a learned behavior. Parents and adults in general are to be those tour guides for the newly born humans, children, incarnating into this physical world. Specifically speaking, the two parents that engaged in the procreation act that resulted in the child's creation and birth are the two tour guides that the universe has assigned to show the child around and teach them about the physical world and society they are born into. At the same time, tour guides are not responsible for your actions or your adherence to their guidelines. Your tour guides, i.e., parents, teachers, family, and adults in society, are only responsible for educating you and making you aware of how to properly engage in society. If your tour guide has told you repeatedly not to play in the street for fear of traffic and being struck by a car, and you, being a human child with a mind and a will of your own, choose to do differently, that is not the fault of the parent, and the child will have to live or die with the consequence of the decision made. The fact that every human is born with a mind and will of their own should illustrate how the universe feels about ownership of another. Again, parents are the tour guides of the universe, and their responsibility is to give proper guidance to young humans entering this world. Now, if you visit a foreign land enough times, eventually you become better accustomed to the customs and practices of that land, and no longer need to depend on a tour guide as heavily, if at all. In fact, at a certain point, you yourself might know said land well enough to where you can become a tour guide for others. This is the process of going from child to adult. As we grow and learn from our parents, teachers, experiences, and society as a whole, we should become better at navigating the world we live in to the point that we can help another navigate this same world if need be. This is why the human body doesn't develop sexual hormones until later in a child's life before they enter the ages of adulthood. This is also why many children who are sexually abused develop social and psychological issues or deviancy as they get older. If they have not been properly taught to understand the purpose and function of their body, including their sexual organs, and they are exposed to certain behaviors or experiences too early, they can become dysfunctional and deviant due to a lack of true understanding of the matter or the experience they are being introduced and exposed to. This goes for any form of childhood trauma or abuse, and is not relegated solely to sexual abuse. Furthermore, if children are not properly taught how to deal with their feelings, emotions, and desires, then they are prone to become dysfunctional or deviant in their actions and lives. This is why parenting and teaching are the most important jobs in the universe, and why there should be a collective village concept adopted by all. While parents act as the assigned tour guides for the child they conceive, there is a collective role that we all play in the lives of children, whether we realize it or not. Children not only learn directly from their parents' teachings and actions, they also learn from observing the current society and environment they are born into. A child being raised in a low-income, poverty-stricken neighborhood is likely to be exposed to certain things in that particular environment, and will observe how the individuals in that environment engage and deal with each other. A better example of this is taking a look at life during slavery and the Jim Crow era in America. During slavery and the Jim Crow era that followed, a human being born into the world at that time would be exposed and taught by the overall environment of the times. A child born with European features, or what some label as white skin features, is not born a racist just because racism is the rule of the day. They are born a human, but they will grow up observing the actions of that society, as well as following what their parents or tour guides teach them. If you as a child observe others like yourself acting a certain way in society, or treating a group of people a certain way, then naturally that child is going to identify with what society is showing them. They will in turn learn and imitate the racist attitudes and actions of that time, and these thoughts and actions would have been constantly reinforced by everyone in society, no matter their race. A human being born with African or black skin features would go through the same indoctrination based on the environment they were born into and how society treats them and those that look like them. So, the black human growing up during the slavery and Jim Crow era would be conditioned and taught by society that they were somehow less than their white counterparts, and everything in society at the time would reinforce these beliefs, no matter how false they truly are. By the same token, the white child will grow up believing they are better than other racial groups simply by being born with white or European features, and everything in society at the time would support and reinforce this idea, no matter how ridiculously false it truly is. Western society's learning institutions once erroneously taught as rule that people with African or black features were not even fully human, and the actions and attitudes of society at that time would reflect and reinforce that flawed way of thinking. This same principle can be applied to gender roles, sexuality, and many other aspects of society. Women being born in the 1920s were exposed to a vastly different society than women being born today. The phrase, "it takes a village," is more true than many would like to admit. The fact is, every single one of us was influenced or inspired by people in our society other than our parents. Yes, our parents are usually our greatest influences, whether we like it or not. But unless we are sheltered from the rest of society, we will eventually meet and observe other individuals outside of our immediate family environment. What we observe, as well as our own interaction with society, will play a role in shaping how we develop and grow, for better or worse. In the case of single parents, the child is affected both by the presence of the parent who stays, as well as the absence of the parent who is absent. Even if that absence is due to the death or incarceration of that parent, the child will still be affected by the loss or lack of interaction, unless by chance another adult steps in to take on the responsibility of parenting the child. As humans, we have a balance of masculine and feminine energies inside all of us. Nature does everything with a purpose. Nature requires a male and a female to procreate in order to create new life. Therefore, growing up, a child needs both male and female influence to help balance their masculine and feminine energies by feeding off of the energy and example set by the first male and female they encounter, their parents. Again, if one of these individuals is absent, that energy and influence is also absent and must either come from another source or be compensated for in some way, shape, or form. This happens regardless of the situation. A child with an absent father will seek that masculine energy in some form or will act in a way to compensate for the lack thereof or attempt to suppress it altogether. This applies to men and women equally. The same goes for an absent mother. The child will seek that feminine motherly energy in some form or it will compensate for it or try to suppress it. Having both male and female parent gives the younger human a better chance at learning to balance their own masculine and feminine energies. Lastly, if we truly understand our roles as parents and the impact and influence we all have as adults on children and the next generation, then we should understand the importance of being the best version of ourselves. As stated before, a child is affected both by a parent's presence and by their absence. If the parent or parents that are present don't set the best example for the young human they are charged by the universe with guiding, then there is a great chance that that child will grow up lacking in the same areas that their parents were lacking, or worse. How can one teach another that which they themselves don't know or truly understand? How can I teach another human about rocket science, quantum physics, or calculus and trigonometry if I myself have no knowledge of these subjects? This is how generations of people are kept in a state of dysfunction, depression, and disenfranchisement. This is why it is not in the best interest for children and adolescents to engage in the procreation process. A child who is still learning, growing, and developing themselves is not in the best position to properly serve as a guide for another human being. It is akin to someone trying to be a tour guide in a land they themselves are new to. You wouldn't travel to a foreign land you've never visited and then attempt to be a tour guide for someone else who also has never visited said land. However, that is exactly what is happening when children or teenagers have children. They are immediately tasked with being responsible for caring for and guiding another with information they themselves are lacking or don't have full understanding of. Note, there are exceptions to almost everything. My point in this book, and this section in particular, is not to focus on the exceptions, but to focus on what can be generally deemed as the best approach. Yes, there are numerous examples of single parents and teenage parents who succeeded in raising and guiding some of the brightest and most esteemed individuals in our society, past and present. My point and focus is there are certain ways to go about life that are generally more beneficial to the whole and the individual, and create a greater chance of success. Whether you had both parents, one parent, or were an orphan, nothing is guaranteed or promised, but there is an approach that has the greatest probability of overall success. If you wanted to take a road trip from New York to California, the best and most probable way to successfully go about doing so would be to head west from New York with 4 good tires. This doesn't mean that someone can't make the trip with 2 or 3 good tires and a spare donut tire, or that someone can't set out going east or south from New York and still find their way to California. The point is, these other possibilities stand to take more time and energy to accomplish the same goal. While there are numerous examples and exceptions when speaking about single parents, the act and service of parenting is a 2-person job. While the village and environment will play a part in influencing young human beings born and raised in today's society, the most direct influence will come from the presence or absence of the parents in a young human life. Children are simply young humans. Adults are old and more experienced humans. Parents are the initial welcoming party to new humans coming into this physical realm of the universe and are responsible for acting as the guides for the new humans they procreate. The environment and village we are born into will influence how we interact with society, and our observations and experiences from interacting and engaging with society itself will influence and play a role in our development process. Children are born dependent upon their parents and society to show them the way. They naturally are trusting that the examples parents and adults set are correct and should be followed. It is in our best interest that we embody the virtues and teachings we wish to influence upon the next generation and society as a whole. Even if you don't have children of your own, someone's child is observing your actions and how you engage in society, for better or worse. This is a thought to carry with you at all times. In closing this chapter, I will once again quote Frederick Douglass. It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. Chapter 11. The practice of meditation and how it helps us to consciously select our thoughts. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. You are not your thoughts. How is it that both of these commonly used quotes are both true, yet seemingly contradictory to each other? How is it possible that they are not mutually exclusive? To answer this question, let's begin with the latter. You are not your thoughts. One of my favorite movies is a film called Inception, featuring the actor Leonardo DiCaprio. To give a quick summary, the movie involves a group of individuals who set forth on a mission to plant a thought inside of a man's head and have him believe that it is his own original thought. In actuality, through a series of scientific and psychological advances, these individuals created the thought and tricked him into thinking it was his own and following through on the thought. That's a simplified summary of the movie. In many American public school systems, children are not taught how to truly think for themselves or how to critically analyze information presented to them to find flaws, lies, and truth and separate one from the other. Instead, children are taught how to memorize the information presented to them by an authority figure and then essentially repeat it back to their instructor via standardized tests and homework assignments. Students are not taught how to question information presented to them in order to actually confirm this information is truthful and not biased or misleading. When you drive down the highway and see billboards, or when you're on social media or the internet and constantly see ads pop up, understand that those are thoughts and ideas that were created by advanced marketing and branding companies focused on planting thoughts inside your mind in hopes that you will listen to those thoughts and act on them or pursue them and purchase whatever it is they are trying to sell. This is why companies pay big bucks to advertising and marketing companies to create thoughts and ideas and place them in the minds of potential consumers. Every day, we are constantly bombarded with thoughts, ideas, and suggestions that are not our own. The first time I went to Times Square in New York and saw all of the big bright lights and signs, it was somewhat of a sensory overload. I was being bombarded with different thoughts and ideas, all fighting for my attention, trying to plant themselves inside my head and influence my actions. I personally don't subscribe to any religion, but if you ask people why they follow the religion they do, you'll find that many are just following what their parents were following or what their society has taught them. Meaning, many of them never had their own thought towards religion. They merely accepted the thoughts and ideas passed down to them from their family or society. We are not defined by our thoughts. Rather, we are defined by our actions or the thoughts and ideas we act upon. Nobody knows the millions of different thoughts that run through your mind every second of every day unless you act on those thoughts or share them with someone. Sometimes random thoughts pop up in your head. These thoughts can be perceived as good or bad. They can be distracting at times, and they can lead to daydreaming or even alter your present mood. However, no matter how bizarre a thought is, it is nothing and has no power unless you dwell on it or act on the particular thought. Have you ever been going about your day and thought about something upsetting that happened at an earlier time or another day and felt yourself getting upset all over again as you dwelled on the unpleasant thought? Have you ever had a bad day at work and then went home to tell your family and friends about it and recognize that it starts to frustrate you all over again? Even though you're not currently at the job or dealing with the situation, by dwelling on it, you are ruining your sense of peace in the current moment. This takes us to the historic quote, "As a man thinketh, so is he." When you have a flashback, troubling thought, or the memory of a traumatic experience, that thought disturbs your sense of peace. You are no longer in the state of mind that you were in prior. You become that which you are thinking about. If you are thinking about something upsetting or offensive, the more you think and dwell on it, the more it affects your mood, making you then become physically and emotionally upset and defensive. I once saw a message on a t-shirt that read, "Did you really have a bad day? Or did you dwell on a negative situation all day and ruin your own happiness?" That is exactly what thought can do. It can alter your present state to something that's not even happening. Yet everything in your body will respond as if that thought is actually occurring in the present moment. This is how you could end up becoming your thoughts, even though they may not be your own thoughts. By constantly dwelling on a particular thought or idea long enough, you begin to embody said idea or thought, and your actions begin to reflect and further reinforce that thought or idea. You are likely to become that which you think about and dwell on constantly. But what does any of this have to do with meditation and controlling your own thoughts and influence? Allow me to explain. Years ago, when I first began the practice of meditation, I ran into the same issue that everyone runs into when they first begin the practice of meditation. I couldn't stop thinking and be still. Being somewhat of an overthinker myself, random thoughts would pop up in my head, and instead of meditating and being still, I would end up daydreaming or fantasizing or just letting my imagination run wild. To put it into meditative terms, I couldn't silence the noise in my head. This noise, which was really a bombardment of thoughts inside my head, is what many yogis and or meditation coaches refer to as the monkey mind. Because much like a monkey, it won't sit still for long. It feels compelled to do something, anything, except for be still. Gaining control over this monkey mind is for many the biggest block and the biggest step in the practice of meditation. Learning how to sit in silence and not think is a bigger task than many realize. We often don't even realize how many different random thoughts are running through our head at any given time of day. We spend much of our day mentally on autopilot and aren't even aware. We think familiar thoughts. What am I going to eat? How do I look? Or we think of events in our past and dwell on them, or we focus on our aspirations for the future and daydream of what it might be like someday. We do so much that takes us away from being at the present moment. Often we aren't even in control of when these thoughts pop up in our head. Many people who are labeled as having ADD or ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, suffer from a barrage of random thoughts that make it difficult for them to maintain focus. However, this same thing to a lesser degree is going on inside many of us who have not yet learned the art of consciously selecting our thoughts. What exactly is meant by consciously selecting our thoughts? How does one accomplish this, and what are the benefits? I myself am still an acolyte in the world of meditation, but I have learned two techniques that have helped me to achieve this task myself. It is not an overnight occurrence. It is a process that takes time. We are creatures of habit, and if you have been running on autopilot for most of your life, then that has become a habit that must now be broken and replaced with new habits. When you begin the practice of meditation, the goal is to master sitting in silence, both inside and out. This includes silencing the mind and stopping all thought. Stopping all thought is not an easy task, especially for beginners and even for those with some experience. It is called the practice of meditation because it's something that takes constant work and practice and mastery, like any other activity that one wishes to excel in. Practice and time must be put in to achieve mastery. The first technique that I learned for stopping all thought and reining in the monkey mind is something that many yogis and meditation coaches will echo. When you are in the process of meditating and find yourself daydreaming or find random thoughts popping up causing your monkey mind to jump around, stop and return to your center of silence. Usually, just by recognizing that you are daydreaming or having a random thought almost immediately puts an end to the thought. By simply acknowledging that you are daydreaming, the daydream immediately stops. You just stop the thought in that moment. When you find yourself thinking to yourself, stop and return to the inner silence. It's an age-old rule. Before you can correct an issue, you must first acknowledge that it is an issue. Through meditation and acknowledging your thought in real time, you are acknowledging that there is an issue. The issue is you did not select these particular thoughts or daydreams. And if your focus is on meditating or quieting the mind, then this is indeed an issue that must be acknowledged and dealt with. The second technique I learned that was helpful takes a bit of imagination. When you find yourself having a thought during your meditation setting, imagine the thought as a sheet of paper. Using your imagination, reach into your mind and take the thought and place it on the floor in front of you. Now, examine the thought that is lying in front of you. Whatever it was you were thinking about, through this imaginative process, you have now separated the thought from you and can analyze from a new perspective. This really helps to illustrate how you are not your thoughts. When you step back and think about some of your thoughts from this vantage point, it gives new perspective. You might find yourself laughing to yourself about some of the thoughts that come through your mind at any given time. What inspires said thought is not as important as you recognizing that this thought is not part of you and doesn't define you. The better you get at stopping thoughts as they pop into your mind, the more attuned you will become to what some yogis and meditation coaches call the watcher, or what ancients often refer to as amen, the hidden one. If you are not your thoughts, then who is it that is stopping the thought? The same one who has been observing all these thoughts seemingly on autopilot. When all thought stops, there is just the watcher sitting and observing. The issue is for many the watcher has been inactive, merely a voyeur, watching and observing but not in the control seat. When you awaken the watcher within, when you awaken amen inside of yourself, you are stepping into the control seat of your own mind. You are no longer as easily controlled, manipulated, or swayed by the thoughts and ideas coming across the mind screen of your conscious. This might feel a bit like you're losing your mind or going crazy at first, but in time, as you gain more conscious control of your thoughts, you will be amazed at how your reality and your approach to reality changes. The best way I can illustrate this is through my own personal experience. Growing up, me and my father didn't have the best relationship. He had been raised by an abusive, no-nonsense stepfather, and while my father was not physically abusive like his stepfather was, he still carried much of that no-nonsense energy with us as children. I was often unnecessarily punished and made to feel as if I didn't have a voice and my thoughts and feelings didn't matter. There were arguments as well as events that occurred that really caused a lot of resentment towards my father. As I grew and matured into an adult, I learned to forgive my father for being the way he was. As I grew on my own journey of self, I began to see my parents in a new, truer light. I took them off the childlike pedestal that I had placed them on for much of my life. I finally began to see my parents as me. They weren't perfect. They didn't know it all or have life all figured out. They were trying to deal with their own personal pains and demons and still function in this world at a time when there was even less tolerance for individuality and where unquestioned conformity was pressed much harder than in current times. I learned to forgive them and love them as two imperfect humans doing their best trying to make it in this world. However, those thoughts and feelings of resentment from my childhood were still floating around in the background. I would find myself being easily irritated by my father and not being as open or engaging when he was present. I was still harboring those thoughts or resentments towards my father, even though I had told myself I had forgiven him, and I honestly sought to have a better relationship with him as an adult. It wasn't until after I had a real in-depth understanding of what was really going on. Those thoughts of pain and resentment were not my own. They were from a much younger, more immature version of myself that I had outgrown. I no longer wanted to harbor resentment towards my father, but I had been doing it for so long it was habitual at this point. I was still running autopilot programs when dealing with my father. My childhood thoughts of resentment were plaguing my adult mind, causing unnecessary conflict between my father and the present time, based on actions that happened years ago. It wasn't until one day when I was with my father and things were pleasant, but I could feel tension arising inside of me. It was my past thoughts of hurt and pain that were resurfacing in the present and ruining my ability to have a healthy relationship with my father as an adult. I had changed, or so I thought I had. I learned about forgiveness and gained understanding of what my father dealt with growing up, which was worse than anything I had personally experienced. Yet, my old thought patterns were handicapping my relationship with my father. I remember noticing my thoughts drifting from the present moment and focusing on past wrongs I had experienced, and I could feel my body tense up in response to these thoughts, almost as if I was living the experience all over again at that moment. It was killing the joy of the present moment with my father. Once I realized this and acknowledged what was going on, I immediately stopped. Just as I had during my meditations, when random thoughts would try to enter my mind and break up the silence of my meditation session. It was literally the same action. Observing a thought, realizing I don't want to dwell on that thought, and then consciously stopping the thought from taking hold in my mind. I could then focus back on the joy of the current moment. I could then choose better, more positive thoughts like, my father has been through a lot, and yet he has always been there for me when I needed him. He has endured abuse that I can't imagine living through. He is a good man, a strong man, and I love him. This was me consciously selecting the thoughts on which to dwell on. Doing this gave me more empathy towards my father and allowed me to open up more and truly forgive and release my resentment. It's a process. Those thoughts of resentment had been running on autopilot for years, and old habits are hard to break. But now I was aware as to what was actually happening, to the point where nowadays, anytime I find myself dwelling on thoughts or actions that will rob my present joy or create unnecessary tension, I silently say stop inside my head, and immediately I'm back to a blank slate and able to choose the thought I want to be present with. The more we do this consciously, the more power we have in consciously shaping and creating our life and the life we want to live. Choosing your thoughts then becomes as simple as changing the channel. When you're watching TV and a program comes on that you don't care for, you pick up the remote and change the channel. This is what the practice of meditation allows you to do with your thoughts every day. Chapter 12. Final Thoughts. As the biblical saying goes, choose today who you will serve. What thoughts will you allow to dwell and fester in your mind today? Thoughts influence actions. So ask yourself, what do you want to manifest in your life? Do you want peace and happiness, or do you want drama and strife? You can choose simply by choosing which thought you will give attention to. It's that simple. Choose today who you will serve. Do this every day without cease. Make it a new habit. Turn off the autopilot and take the control seat. You are in control now. You decide which thoughts you will give energy to. The thoughts you dwell upon constantly, whether conscious or unconsciously, will manifest into actions which will create the trajectory of your life. The power is yours. Awaken the hidden one. Amen.